Okay, great. All right, so for tonight's class, we're going to go with an introduction to brachos, introduction to saying blessings on food. I was not able to put together syllabus, so what we're going to cover tonight is basically why we say brachos on food, what brachos we're going to cover tonight, and some general rules covering those brachos. Okay, so first things first, the reason why we say the brachos. Blessings on food is there's a story in the Gemara where there was a wealthy gentleman who, and whenever he would host a meal for his family or for everybody, he would begin by saying, as the meal commenced, he would say, that the whole world belongs to God and all of its works is part of His glory. And for mankind to enjoy, etc., etc. This is a quote from, is a verse from Sefer Tehillim. Had I properly prepared a syllabus, I would be able to cite that for you. But basically, that seems to be the background in the Talmud as to where this idea comes from saying brachos on food. Another possible example that the Gemara discusses. This is a Gemara in the 6th chapter of Brachos, which is called Ketzad Mevarchin, how do we say blessings on food. The Gemara there discusses the idea that when we would bring our first fruits from planted trees, that they would recite Hallel and they would recite praises to God, and therefore the suggestion was made that perhaps this was something that the Torah mandated, that whenever you enjoy any type of fruit, that you should therefore say some type of praise. That idea is basically rejected in favor of the overwhelming logical concept that a person should not benefit from this world without first thanking the Creator. And so therefore that seems to be the going logic as to why brachos are said before food. And also, just in terms of the time period when things are being said, if there were any external influences, there is a concept in Platonic philosophy that Plato suggested that a person basically organize their thoughts and praises to their Creator at the beginning of each day, and that this concept was prevalent in the time, and so therefore the idea of saying brachos on food became apropos as a result of some of these potential philosophical influences. We have any proof for that? No. What we do know is the Talmud brings those other two cases. So was the idea more prevalent at the time? Perhaps. So let's go over all the brachos on food. The brachos on food are basically organized in the following way. They are designed to be very specific around certain types of food, and then they become much more general. Meaning that there are certain types of food that are considered the most essential and important parts of your meal and diet, and therefore they get special blessings, and things that are not considered unique or special do not get any special blessings to them. So the types of food that get the most specific and unique blessings are bread, wine, other wheat products, fruits that grow from a tree, fruits that grow, or vegetables that grow from the ground, or fruits that don't grow on a tree. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then everything else just gets lumped in a general bracha of that God creates everything. And so there is a significant amount of praise heaped upon bread and wine, and other products made from species of grain, and from those things praised in the Torah as being fruits of the land of Israel, things that are fruits from trees and so on. And then everything else gets wrapped into a general category. So we're going to go through each one of those brachos now. What I'm first going to give everybody is I'm going to provide the guide to blessings. This is an OU guide. I'll email it to you. And I'm going to do a little screen share here 1 second so we can all go through it together. Screen share. Talk over here for a second. Okay. So everybody sees this page, it's the OU kosher page. And this is the OU guide to blessings. And you can basically go through here, alphabetical style, sort of see different types of food and different blessings on it. And this is a free guide. All the way down, and I think they even have a PDF that they have all the way at the end over here. Everybody's not busy from watching me scroll through here. Go to the bottom. I think I have a PDF, right? Did I miss it? Oh, it's at the top. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so all these things are all at the top. And I'll send it to you in a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay. So basically that guide, basically you can go through that full list and find pretty much any food and look up what blessing you're going to need. And that's one way to do it. Just know what food you want, and I'm showing everybody the link over here. And so therefore, when you want to just look at that's your easiest bet. So as long as you know what bracha you need to say. Now the question is, what about reminding yourself about what bracha to say? I have a website for that one too. This one is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically this web page over here, I'm providing you in the. Everybody just make sure you have chat turned on, and that way you'll get these links. Okay, and what you should see on these websites is basic rules and guidelines for saying brachos. Okay, you're gonna get those just a second right here. Okay, so let's start with the most specific bracha. The most specific bracha is hamotzi, which is all brachos start with the following formula, which is Baruch Atah Hashem, which is Baruch. The word Baruch, I can give a whole class on that word because basically there's a lot of discussions on it. And the interesting thing about the word I'm going to translate, the translation I'm going to give you is source of all blessing. That Hashem is considered the source of all things that receive special attention in the world. He gives to them, and not that God Himself is lacking of blessing or is in need of some type of fulfillment by human beings, but that Baruch is literally a word that acknowledges the fact that God is a source of blessing. Even the word itself indicates that it's something constantly flowing. For example, a berecha is a stream in Hebrew, which it comes from the same root letter as Beis Resh Cha. And so Baruch Atah Hashem, that you're acknowledging that Hashem is the source of all of these great things and bountiful things that occur in the world. That is the first part of the blessing. Then you get to Elokeinu Melech Haolam. There's an imperative. The Gemara discusses that there is a tremendous imperative to recognize God's sovereignty over these things. Not only does He provide for them, but that He is the sovereign over them as well. So it's not like He has to borrow the materials from without Himself, outside of Himself, but that these things are all His and are under His domain to bestow upon anybody else. And then to the end of the blessing, of the first blessing we're going to talk about, is Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, which is who brings forth bread, Hamotzi Lechem, bread, Min Haaretz, from the earth. So He provides bread from the earth. Now, this does sound like, in a sense, that bread would be growing on trees, which is not the imperative of the blessing, which is why it makes sense to call it the source of all blessing. That God provides us with the capabilities to produce bread from all these things that come from the earth, and that's why I like translating it as saying that God's the source of all blessing, and that He's a sovereign over it, who gives us and provides us the necessary tools by which we can create and produce bread from the earth. And so that is the number one thing. So the first thing you have to try to discuss is, what is bread? Okay? Everybody know what bread is? Okay, we don't. That means everybody only thinks they know what bread is. Yeah, what's bread? What's bread? Yeah, I didn't know what bread is. All right. Yeah. Okay. So bread has very specific halachic categories. Because there's also another bracha which we'll get to, which is mazonos, and we'll discuss that one in passing. Because if it's not bread, right, but still made from wheat, the bracha you get is mazonos, which is Borei Minei Mazonos, right? Who created types of satisfying things, right? But it's not bread. So at some point it stops being bread and starts being mazonos. The question is, what? Okay, so number one, we can rule out anything that's cooked. Okay, so if you cook, if you take wheat, or the five grains are wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and oats. And so any one of those five things can be made into a bread product or a mazonos product. And so if you cook them, like you make oatmeal or cream of wheat, anything of that, or you make mushroom barley soup, where the main ingredient is a grain, those are all mazonos because they're clearly not bread. And that's because you cooked it. Let's say you baked it, right? Well, if you baked them straight up, actually, oddly enough, if you took the kernels and just baked it, that should be brei pri ha'adamah, because you haven't actually gone through a manufacturing process. In order for you to actually make them into mazonos, you have to actually crack the germ and begin to process them. If you haven't done that, then you're actually eating a regular old fruit of the earth. So that doesn't count either. So you have to go through. It has to go through a process whereby you grind it into flour. You crack the germ, and you grind it into a flour. If you stop before you get to flour, right? So in the mazonos category. Now you take it and you ground it into flour, right? So is everything ground, everything made from ground of those five species mixed with a liquid become motzi? Okay, rhetorical question. It's not. So it's very specific rules about it. There's also a subcategory in bread, okay? Because there's going to be baked products that are not going to be bread. The Talmud talks about categories of foods that are not bread, and this is where something so super spiritual all of a sudden sounds like you're doing logical loopholes. Okay, all of a sudden you're trying to connect to God, at the same time you're trying to debate what blessing you say over your Danish in the morning, and you sort of lose that connectivity. So I'm here to help you realize that it's really not that bad. It's really just a way of understanding and appreciating the different ways in which we connect with the food that we're eating. So you've made your flour, and now you want to make a product with it. Okay, so let's say you go ahead and you mix it with water and you bake it. All right, that is bread. Everyone agrees that is bread. Water, flour, baked bread. Okay. If you mix water and flour and you leave it outside and it bakes, that is not bread. If you mix water and flour and you fry it, that is not bread. You say mazonos on those. Okay, so if you mix water and flour and, well, I guess if you mix water and flour and you cook it, that's noodles, that's mazonos. So let's just make that point as well. So if you mix water and flour and you bake it, okay, you're going to have bread. Let's say you break it so that's crispy and flaky. Let's say you bake it and you put something inside of it. Let's say you bake it and you mix it. Maybe you don't just want water and flour because that's kind of boring and tasteless. So you add some spices to it, okay, to make it better. So is that bread? So the Talmud has a category called pas haba b'kisnin, which is called bread that comes as, and people don't know the exact translation of the word kisnin. So actual bread, everyone agrees, even in the Talmud, that water and flour is fine, but start stuffing it with something sweet. So So you make it like a pastry of some kind, or you make it like a Danish. That becomes the second category of pasta baba kisten, where the word kisten means a kiss, like a pocket bread. Okay, a pocket bread is not necessarily hamotzi because it's not. It's the Gemara explains it's not meant to be the main anchor of your meal. So we learn from the Talmud basically that bread has to anchor your meal. Calzone is another good example where you take your bread dough, water, and flour, and you stuff it with cheese and/or sauce. Thank you. And those are all things that may or may not be coming as part of a meal that may be more intended to be a snack. So that's one category where pasta baba kisten in the secondary category may mean that you are not actually eating a bread, but eating some type of snack otherwise. The next category is, let's say you bake it and it becomes flaky, okay, like puff pastry or like crackers, okay, or like matzah. These things would be, if they're flaky, are technically going to be mizonos because they're not meant to be part of a meal. You use crackers and such to basically not to make it the essential part of your meal. It comes to basically the sort of as a filler in between meals. Okay, and so therefore the word kisten over there means kasas. Kasas means flaky, and that's another type of baked product that is not really bread. And the third type is you're boiling flour and water. You want to add something to it. Let's say flour and water is boring, so you take flour and apple juice, or flour, water, and sugar, flour, water, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, those could also be pasta baba kisten, like, because if you mix in, flour and water and butter, it's a pound cake, and so that would be not considered. People don't have whole meals on pound cake. So this type of pasta baba kisten means that it is mixed and it is filled with other spices and such. This also becomes a type of mizonos. But the Gemara also mentions that it's entirely possible for you to go crazy and take one of these types of bread and make a whole meal out of it. So it's entirely possible to take these things and make a whole meal out of a Danish, make a whole meal out of crackers, make a whole meal out of any of these things that I've just mentioned. So if you eat enough of it, it actually becomes bread because it basically takes up a whole meal. Okay? Whereas straight up bread becomes hamotzi every single time, because you should assume that if you're going to be eating that thing, you're going to be sitting down and having a meal. Okay? So let's just review this again. So if you're going to sit down and have straight up bread, which is your plain old flour and water, then you're always going to say hamotzi on that. Okay? Which means there's another operation of hamotzi, which you just have to wash your hands and say al nitlas yadayim before you eat the hamotzi. I don't want to dwell on that too much about the history of that, but just know for right now, there's some other time we can talk about the laws of that. Just know that you wash twice on the right and twice on the left with a washing cup, and you say al nitlas, the bracha of al nitlas yadayim. And then you would go sit down and say hamotzi lechem aretz on your bread, okay? And that would be your flour and water bread, okay? And then let's say you have your other type of foods, okay? You have your one that's filled with, you have your bread that's filled with apple, sweet apples. That one will be berei minei mizonos, okay? And if you have your flaky pastry dough or cracker and so on, those are going to be berei minei mizonos. And if you have something that's made really super sweet, it's going to be berei minei mizonos. The times where we get super iffy. So just to kind of throw out some things that are going to be that you'll see in some of these guides. Things that get iffy are those bread products that are filled with meat and cheese, like pizza, calzones, knish, and so on. Where you basically have food that is filled with meat or cheese, which may come as part of a meal. So some people feel that for pizza or calzones and so on, that you're going to have to actually wash and then say hamotzi. Whereas some people feel that this isn't really bread, and this is not really a meal, and so therefore you can get away with mizonos. the advice I'm going to give you is that basically if you're sitting and having a calzone, just based on the size of the calzone, if the calzone is basically larger than your fist, that should be a hamotzi calzone. If it's smaller than your fist, that could be Mizonos, because basically we're gonna rely on certain leniencies and the fact that you're not eating a large enough size to be considered a meal. And the size for a meal basically the size of about 3 eggs, which is larger than 3 ounces. Which is, anybody who knows me knows that I'm on this craze now, explaining to people that eating 30 grams of protein is like a good way to actually have a balanced diet. And so 30 grams, about 3 ounces, about the size of 3 eggs. So if you can kind of picture that, if it's larger than 3 eggs, you're really having a serious meal. And if it includes a bread product that pretty much behaves like bread, then you should wash and say hamotzi on it. So if you're going to go crazy, you can go to Entenmann's and eat the whole Danish, that long Danish thing. You should probably wash and say hamotzi on it, even though it's like, filled with raspberry filling or whatever. And if you're doing that, there's other issues you got to deal with other than washing and saying hamotzi on that. But you would have to do that. Let's see. What if you think you'll only have 1 slice of pizza, so you say Mizonos, and then you eat 3 because you're starving, right? Or eat 3 because it's Tuesday, right? So what happens is that after you eat your first one, you would go wash your hands. You'd say Anich Tzatzadayim, and then you would go back and continue eating without saying another bracha, okay? Because the only difference in the operation of the eating is that you won't have to say another bracha because you've already said Mizonos on the pizza, but you have to go wash your hands because now you're actually having a meal. So you have 2 separate operations of law. One is the bracha operation, which is making sure that you have thanked God for everything that you're eating. Well, you did that, okay? And then there's and I'll talk about this later when I talk about fruits and stuff, that when you say a bracha, it's going to cover everything that you have in front of you. But over here, you kind of have a situation where you kind of change your mind in the middle. But you kind of thought you were going to stop, okay? So, but what if you thought that you're only going to eat so much, but you decided you're going to continue eating? Is that considered changing a meal in the middle, which would make another hamotzi? So, I'm fairly certain that this doesn't happen very often, but I'm fairly certain the way that we paskin is that the way we conduct this is that if you've eaten 1 slice and you decide you want to have a couple more, then you just go wash your hands, say Anich Tzatzadayim, and then continue eating because you haven't really changed your meal in any way, shape, or form. If you were still sitting down eating, you just want to eat more, you just go wash, come back, because you've gone from having a meal that was you go from having not a meal to a meal, basically, having a snack to a meal. So you've upgraded yourself and you wash your hands, because it's a separate operation of washing your hands for bread. It has nothing to do with the actual bracha on the food itself. They're two separate operations. So in a case like that, where you have 1 piece of pizza where you would say Mizonos, and then you decide while you're in the middle of that piece, you're like, I think I'm going to eat 2 more. So you would go ahead, wash your hands, and go back and eat. That's if in the middle of eating it. Let's say you stop eating, okay, and you decide you want to eat another one, then you would have to wash and say a new hamotzi, because once you stop your meal and you intend to end it, then you've ended your meal. Like your bracha doesn't have, you have no more. You basically have no more operation of law. I'm sorry. Well, not connected. I mean, you could be at the table still, but you have no intentions. You don't have the intention to continue eating, and so as a result, you're basically starting a new meal. So it would be the same thing like you're picking a book and you don't have the intention to read anymore. You put a bookmark in and put it down. Right, your first reading session is now over, and you're like, I want to read some more. Just for whatever reason you want to read some more. You're now in basically a new operation of reading. You open, take the bookmark out, and continue going. So you did stop in between there. So in that situation, you would then, if you had the 1 slice finished, and then go, I'm still hungry, you would wash your hands, say Anich Tzatzadayim, and then go say hamotzi on the next 2 slices that you're going to have. And just to clarify that again, 1 slice of pizza would be Mizonos, and anything beyond that would be hamotzi. And again, that's because of the size of the pizza slices. 1 pizza slice is generally just couple of ounces, and not really enough to be a meal. But 2 or 3 or 8 would be a meal. So that would be hamotzi. And so can talk about calzone. So anything in the pasta baba kissin category would also be the same thing. If you're going to sit down and have some puff pastry, and whatever it is you have an apple fritter, whatever it is that you want to have, and you have 1, that would be mizonos. And then if you decide you're going to have 3, number 1, check your glucose levels. Number 2, you would have to wash and say hamotzi. Generally, this is discouraged because it's not. There are some poskim who feel that you won't necessarily continue eating enough, and so therefore this is not a good habit. So to sit down and basically say hamotzi on a vanilla cake is not a good idea if you have a whole big cake out in front of you. There are other possibilities. Like, let's say you can't find another challah on Shabbos, but you have a whole cake. Those are interesting things to think about, the ways you can use cake as a bread or Danish as a bread to have, which you have 2 loaves of challah on Shabbos. But we can talk about that another time when we want to get into some crazy sort of details about lechem mishnah on Shabbos, about having 2 loaves on Shabbos, not in the class on brachos. So if you're in these other categories and you're not eating that much, these other types of food basically be mizonos. So let's get into the sort of in-between categories. So many breads are more than just flour and water. Many of them are also flour, water, a little bit of oil, and a little bit of sugar for the yeast. Keep it doing this, keep it doing that, and sometimes you mix in multigrains, you mix in some seeds and at this flavor, or what if you get cinnamon raisin, and what if the bread has onions in it, and so on and so forth. Basically, this goes back to the third category I mentioned, that flavored doughs can be mizonos and be pasta baba kissin, this third category of bread that is flavored. And it is a dispute between Ashkenazic and Sephardic customs. Sephardic custom is that anytime you feel there's a secondary flavor in your dough, you taste onion, you taste sugar, you taste sweet, you taste sour, you taste something else, the bread is going to be mizonos unless it's large enough to actually have a whole meal. And the size for Sephardim was quite large. It was like I think it's 400 grams or something like this for that type of thing to be considered a meal. And so as a result, I think for Sephardim, you would need about 3 slices of pizza in order for you to actually have a meal in this case. And so therefore, Sephardic Jews would have the custom of saying on a cinnamon raisin bagel, mizonos, and on an onion bagel, they'd say mizonos. Onion rolls, mizonos. Everything with the flavor in it would be mizonos. Whereas Ashkenazic tradition is a little bit more broad in what it accepts as full-fledged bread, and things like onion rolls and cinnamon raisin bagels, if you're going to go ahead and still make a meal out of them. So you'll have a cinnamon raisin bagel the same way you would have a plain bagel, right? You would have to say hamotzi on it, okay? Even though it's super sweet. Unless it's a situation where the cinnamon raisin bagel is eaten as a snack. So if it was, let's say, a cinnamon roll, where the difference is that the cinnamon roll could have just as easily become cinnamon challah or cinnamon bagel. The recipe is, let's say, relatively much the same. Because of the way that it is prepared and the slight differences in it, it looks more like and is treated like a dessert. Then the cinnamon roll would be mizonos. A cinnamon raisin bagel would be hamotzi, just because of how we treat it as a food product. So cinnamon raisin bagel would be hamotzi, and cinnamon roll would be mizonos. Okay, just because that's just how we treat it. So when you get into that category, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Yes.
Waffles, as a meal.
Okay, so pancakes are going to be considered as fried for our purposes, because even though you often will prepare them in a dry heat, which would be similar to baking, the pancakes are generally meant to be fried and don't look necessarily like a bread product and aren't treated as such. You wouldn't have to make hamotzi on it. Waffles would be the same. Those will only be Mizonos because of the fact that they're not meant to look like normal bread, and therefore are treated differently. And a waffle cone would be the same thing, same idea. It's through the same process. And also because in general, when you make them, you're also going to fill them with sugar and with fruit, and other things, and so that's therefore going to preclude them from being treated like normal bread. Because normal bread you would have with fish and cheese and other things like that as well. With fruit, makes it more like a snack. So that's the big difference. Or something sweet like syrup on top, make it more like a snack. Or with whipped cream. I'm thinking about waffles. Okay, so that's basically hamotzi and mizonos. So with mizonos, you're basically going to say mizonos on any product that doesn't that has wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats in it as the main ingredient. It doesn't look like bread. Okay, so pancakes and waffles are mentioned. Chocolate chip cookies are going to be an example of something that is in that category where you're going to say mizonos on it, whereas a chocolate chip challah, which would look like bread, would be hamotzi because you made it look like bread. So even though between a cookie and a challah doesn't seem like much when you put chocolate chips in it, it's again how you make it look. So you make a small little thing for a cookie, while a challah looks like a loaf of bread, and so therefore those are going to be your biggest differences. Okay, so I think that covers introduction wise for hamotzi and mizonos. Technically the most specific bracha is hamotzi, and then the next most specific bracha is borei pri hagafen. This one's pretty easy. Borei pri hagafen is the bracha that you say on wine and grape juice. Okay. And the only thing you really need to know about this bracha is that your grape juice has to be no more than 5 parts water mixing with your grape juice. So if it's less than 1/6 of the drink, it no longer is considered grape juice or wine. So if you add too much water to it, it becomes sha'akol, becomes like a grape drink. Nice thing about this is that people will generally just answer this question for you on the packaging. Since grape juice always requires a hechsher, it will generally also state what bracha is on the side of it. So for example, if you buy kedem grape juice, it'll say berachaso borei pri hagafen. Let me grab the bottle here. It says it on the back here. Oh, they used to have it on here. They're on top anymore? Okay. Okay. They don't write on here. What they write instead is that it's acceptable for Kiddush and for Arba Kosos on Pesach. Alright, but on many drink boxes you'll see they'll say the bracha on it. They'll say Berachaso Sha'akol, Berachaso Borei pri hagafen. On kosher juice boxes, because they'll tell you the ratio of water to grape juice, or if there's anything else mixed into it that reduces the ratio less than 1/6 grape juice. And if you mix it and you have five parts other liquids and 1 to 1 part grape juice, it's going to be sha'akol. Okay, and that's pretty much it for borei pri hagafen. The only other thing that would be interesting to note is that if you have non-mevushal wine and you mix it with other things, it still has a problem of being moved by people who are not Jewish, where it would be prohibited. So therefore, if you're going to make something with non-mevushal wine, it should technically be cooked, so that way it could be served and used to anybody and for anything. Okay, that's other than that, there's not really much else to worry about wine for right now. So we talked about mizonos. Mizonos is the third most specific bracha, and that one is on anything made from the 5 species of grain that are the ones that we mentioned. So it'll be either cooked or baked. If it's not bread, you're going to say mizonos on it. The only other food that gets mizonos on it is, audience? That's not one of those 5 grains. What else has mizonos on it? Esther.
It says
On something that's not. It's not made from either wheat, barley, rye, spelt, or oats. At least in Amazon. Nope, not corn. Good guess. Going once, going twice.
Wait, I'm thinking.
Cornbread. Come on. The answer is rice. Rice on rice. Okay. Okay. The answer is rice. That if you take rice and you've broken the germ on rice. Okay, so it's not whole grain rice. It is regular white or brown rice, and you cook it and it gets super sticky. Or on rice cakes, the bracha is Borei Minei Mazonos. Why? Because it's mentioned in the Talmud that way. There actually were some people who suggested that things like corn, which could be made into cornbread, the bracha should also be Borei Minei Mazonos on it. And even for places where they would make other quote-unquote baked products out of it, they thought, hey, if you're going to eat this as a satiating food product, but not as a meal, it should be Borei Minei Mazonos on it. But the only one that we actually, so it's debated. It's debated by medieval rabbis, discussed, shot down. Long story short, the only other foods that are not made from the 5 main grains is going to be rice cakes and super gooey, sticky rice will be Borei Minei Mazonos. But if you see the individual parts of rice, such as when you make whole grain rice where the germ is still intact, on the ones that take like 45 minutes to make, right? If your rice takes less than 20 minutes to make, 20 minutes or less to make, okay, that is going to be Borei Minei Mazonos rice. If it takes 45 minutes to make, right, and we still have the germ there, that means that it is Borei Pri Ha'adamah rice. Okay? Corn muffin. Corn muffin confused you. Let's take, actually, so that's a good question then. Let's look at that. Let's look that up real quick. Corn muffin. I'm going to look that up for you. Corn muffin. Corn muffin no wheat is shahakol, and corn muffin with wheat is mazonos. Okay, so I'm assuming that the confusion is why is a corn muffin shahakol? Oh, okay, it's the wheat. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so just so everybody understood, a corn muffin made straight up corn meal is shahakol. Okay, because you don't know what it's made out of. But if there's flour in it, it becomes Borei Minei Mazonos. Okay, another exception with Mazonos, this is what we like to call the Twizzlers rule, okay, or the Jolly Ranchers rule, soft Jolly Ranchers. Hard ones, no one not kosher, but they're hard. If there's wheat in it, wheat is used as a thickening agent. It does not. So when you make a gravy, okay. Or when you make Twizzlers, or you make Jolly Ranchers, those cute little gummy candies are made with wheat to agglutinate them, to make them sticky. That is shahakol niyeh b'varo. Why? Because you don't want the wheat. You don't need the wheat. You want the sugar to be thick. And so wheat is used as a thickening agent. So therefore the prop bracha on Twizzlers is Borei Minei Mazonos. Is shahakol niyeh b'varo. The correct bracha on Twizzlers is shahakol niyeh b'varo. And on any candy that contains wheat flour, is shahakol niyeh b'varo. Okay, and anytime, so if you sat down and you're having one of those days, you just want to drink straight up gravy, the bracha is going to be shahakol niyeh b'varo. Yeah, if you're drinking straight up gravy, just give me a call. So there'll be people out there who will tell you that the bracha on Twizzlers is Borei Minei Mazonos. Run from those people. Just run. Just turn the other way and just run away. Yeah, it's just. They clearly don't understand. They take the candy away. They clearly don't understand how to use the candy either. If they think Twizzlers are a satiating product, they got issues. So anyway, moving right along over here. So let's talk about healthy stuff like fruits and vegetables. Okay. So we have two brachos talking about things that actually grow from the ground that are neither that are not a type of wheat. I'm going to make flour out of it. You can bake them and all those things like that. But we'll start with Borei Pri Ha'etz, or any fruit that grows on a tree. So what is a tree? Right? Like this is a standard common thing, right? What's a tree? So a tree is not what you think is a tree. So a tree, technically, in halacha, is anything that's perennial. Okay, so if it goes back, if it reoccurs annually, and the fruit shows up again, that is considered a tree because the roots stay around for a very, very long time. Well, this created significant debate for a very long time after the close of the Talmud, because basically you had a lot of berries that stick around for a very long time, like strawberries. And anybody who's ever seen a strawberry knows that grows a little bitty bush on the ground, flat in the ground. It comes back year after year. The root structure stays, it remains, it flowers, it blooms, it makes little berries. You go, you pick them, you have a great day, make jam. Okay? The strawberry. All right? And raspberries and other things like this. Raspberries grow on these straight stick things straight out of the ground. All right? And these little, they pop off on little buds on the side. And so you have a whole bunch of these perennial types that grow on weird things. Same thing too with grapes. So basically, what was settled on basically after the close of Talmud by the heads of the yeshivas in the Babylonian era, the Babylonian post-Talmudic Babylonian era, and the rabbis known as the Gaonim, and this was further even debated and agreed upon later on in the medieval period before the writing of the Shulchan Aruch, was that it's also only considered a tree if it reoccurs every year and it has a trunk larger than 9 inches. So basically, larger than 9 inches means that it's far enough away from the ground to not be on the ground. Okay? And this pretty much includes almost all berry bushes. Many berries grow on trees as well. So all types of nuts and berries and fruits that you see, oranges, apples, and so on. All those little fun things have a stem, and you can walk up to a tree and pick them. Blueberries and such are all going to be Borei Pri Ha'etz. All right, and if it's not growing on a tree, it grows on the ground like the strawberries. Raspberries, there was still a dispute until recent times, and we've settled on them being Borei Pri Ha'adamah. If you say Borei Pri Ha'etz on raspberries or strawberries, that's okay. You can still eat them without having to make another bracha. But they are technically Borei Pri Ha'adamah. The reason why is because you can rely on those opinions who held that they technically could have been Borei Pri Ha'etz since you made a mistake. But you shouldn't be saying Borei Pri Ha'adamah on them anyway, okay? Because there's no trunk. So our rules for being a tree is it has to have a trunk. Now, there are some things that look like they grow on a tree, but they're not actually a tree. So things like papaya and banana don't actually grow on a tree. They just look like they grow on a tree. Okay? So those things are actually Borei Pri Ha'adamah. The reason why is because those trees are not actually perennial. They're cut back every year. They grow down, they come back up. So they so those things go away and don't come back every year. They also grow on a vine off of the tree, and so they get Borei Pri Ha'adamah. And as you look at different fruits, check it out, like pineapples and such. You'll see that they grow all these crazy little tropical fruits are a lot different than the ones that like the normal ones that grow in our regions. The tropical ones grow in a very, very different manner. So those are things to be aware of. So for example, if you look at the guide, for example, you look up papaya. Okay. Oh, it says ha'etz on here. Okay, my bad. Papaya is ha'etz. You know, papaya grows on a weird tree. I guess that tree does come back year after year. What was the other one I was thinking of? Pineapple is ha'adamah. Pineapple grows in that weird fashion also. Guava may also, I think you're right. Let's see. No, guava is ha'etz. Okay, and right. So those are all going to be ha'etz. If you're just not sure, just look at. People basically went ahead and researched all this stuff for you, so you just don't have to remember it, and you can just always research it. And once you kind of know, it's going to be there. You can just look it up, and you don't have to actually go online and research it, unless you want to. You can also research why it's a certain bracha. But just know that if the tree is cut back year after year, or if it grows up a vine off of a tree, it's going to be ha'adamah. Fruits that grow on vines are going to be Borei Pri Ha'adamah. So all types of melons are Borei Pri Ha'adamah. The only thing that grows on a vine that's Borei Pri Ha-Eitz is grapes. Grapes are Borei Pri Ha-Eitz. The grapes themselves, the fruit, the grape is Borei Pri Ha-Eitz. And it only becomes Borei Pri Ha-Gafen after you take it and you squish it and put it in a cup. Okay. So, but as long as there's still the meat of the actual grape itself, it's Borei Pri Ha-Eitz. Okay, because those things come back year to year. That's the only exception to the Ha-Eitz rule that we mentioned previously, is grapes. Okay, and that's pretty much all you really need to know about Ha-Eitz. Ha-Adama is basically everything else that grows from the ground. So your lettuces, your cabbages, your root vegetables, potatoes, radishes, rutabagas, are all going to be Borei Pri Ha-Adama. The only things that grow on the ground that are not Borei Pri Ha-Adama that are going to be Shehakol are, anybody? E-grape. What grows on the ground that's not Borei Pri Ha-Adama?
Strawberries.
They are Borei Pri Ha-Adama. Thank you, Mike. The answer is mushrooms. Mushrooms and other those types of things. Yep, all types of mushrooms, because they don't actually grow in the ground. They grow on the ground because they are fungi and they don't actually have root structures. And so they are Shehakol Niyev Baro. So mushrooms are the exception. Okay. And so since those type of things grow on the ground, or grow off the ground, there actually was a big debate with hydroponics. Hydroponics are actually Shehakol because even though they are themselves lettuces, they did not grow on the ground. I'm pretty sure they have that on the list here too. Hydroponics are listed. Hydroponics are they don't list it in here. That's bad. But I can give another class on hydroponics another time if we really want to research it. The bracha on hydroponics would basically be Shehakol Niyev Baro, and because it didn't actually grow on the ground, it grew basically floating in solution in this wonderful water solution that kept it floating off the earth. So that's a sort of an interesting side point. I don't even know if they do hydroponics anymore. There was a time when hydroponics was like cool. I don't think hydroponics is cool anymore. Probably people got tired of eating the sand all the time. But in Israel, for sure, they still have hydroponics. So that's just something. That's just something interesting to keep back in mind. I don't think we have any hydroponics left in the United States I can think of. They used to be much more prevalent. Okay, so that is Borei Pri Ha-Adama, and then last but not least, Shehakol Niyev Baro, and then I'll basically end the broadcast. And if anyone has questions, we can take those at that time. Shehakol is basically everything else. It's your fish, your meat, your cheese, things that don't actually grow from the earth itself, even though they benefit from the earth, and we eat them. Those things are all Shehakol. All types of drinks are Shehakol, whether it's coffee or tea or anything else, are all going to be Shehakol. Sorry about that. That's my serial reminder to count Sphira. I remember to count Sphira tonight. Anything else that if it doesn't meet the category of food is going to be Shehakol Niyev Baro, and that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to really say about Shehakol. There are some other rules to know about saying blessings, like if you have multiple items together. What if you have tuna fish, which is Shehakol, with a cracker, which is Zonos? Are they two separate blessings? Are they one blessing? That's beyond the scope of this class because it's very complex and involved thing, but I want to actually touch on one of those complex things, which was possible about Kissin, which we talked about tonight, in order to differentiate between different things. So I will leave you once again with having covered the brachos of Hamotzi, Hagafen, Zonos, Ha-Eitz, Ha-Adama, and Shehakol in that order of preference. And you should, if you have different types of food, you should always give preference in that order. And if you have types of fruits around you, you should also give preference to the fruits that are from the land of Israel. So if you want to eat all of them, give preference to the fruits that grew in the land of that were grown in the land of Israel. When you follow some of the guides, you'll be able to learn some of these things. So that's our introduction for this evening, and if you want to stick around and ask questions, feel free. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. And this will actually be, I think this may actually be the last class on the basic halacha class. And after this, I'll be following up with some emails about some follow-up classes to see what other people are interested about. And so if you haven't sent me topics yet, I'll send an email around to remind you about topics. Thanks for coming out.